Could you introduce yourself and tell us about the company you work for?
So I work at Google, and why do I work there? I guess by accident, because I never thought I would get through the interview process, and I did. So that's how working at Google happened. But yeah, I work at Google in the identity team, and that's the team that manages consumer products like the password manager, the Google account, etc. I work specifically on age-related topics. Currently, there is more and more regulation, especially now in Europe, but also globally, where we have to know if the user is an adult or a minor, and that's the topic I work on currently.
And how long have you been working at Google?
I've been working at Google for a bit over 2 years now.
Please tell more about your experience.
So at the moment, I'm a PM, product manager at Google, and like I said, a bit over 2 years. Before that, I was a product manager at Zalando, a bit over 3 years there. And before that, I've had a long career in digital transformation, especially in media. And so I've had a long tenure in Finnish and international media companies, figuring out how to do business online in very like traditional context, like printed press. How do we do classifieds online, or TV? How do we do TV online? And that's kind of my first career, I would say, working in these traditional companies during the years when the digital transformation really happened in media. Then decided that I want to also work in kind of digital native companies that have been kind of founded in the era when the business was kind of built digital already. And I consider this like product management in tech companies now as my second career. And I mean, one thing I'm super passionate about is kind of career pivots as well. So it's never too late to start something new. And yeah, that if anyone is kind of interested in pivoting into product management later in their career, that's also something that I really enjoy discussing.
What's the main area of your responsibility in the company?
So at Google, the product management role is really strategic. So the engineers are really empowered, and they don't like me going into their domain and start telling them how to build things. So at Google, the product manager really focuses on the problem, really focuses on the long-term strategy, focuses on kind of orchestrating the cross-functional team, because everyone is such an expert in their own domain. We have writers, we have designers, we have researchers, data scientists, etc., not just engineers. And all of these people have to kind of go into the same direction and have the same context and work in similar rhythm. And so the PM role is way more this kind of communication and orchestrating kind of role than it is about kind of sitting next to the engineering team and seeing that the tickets are written in the right way. So that, I guess, would describe my role. It's very much negotiation, it's sales, internal sales, it's deep user understanding, market understanding, and really focusing on the why.
How many people in your team?
Well, I mean, for me, it's an interesting situation. My team is actually kind of a collection of people working in various teams. So my product is kind of horizontal in a way that like I don't really have, I have a couple of engineers working on a prototype, but otherwise I'm kind of then going into other people's teams and orchestrating across teams to get my product forward. And so in that sense, it's not a traditional setup where I would have a fixed set of people who I work with day in and day out, which is also kind of typical Google, I guess. The more senior we get, the less tied we are to a specific team, and the more we are expected actually to work across multiple teams.
What skills are needed to develop to become more successful in that career?
I think product management has seen a shift from the really technical focus where everyone was expected to have an engineering background. At least at Google, that has changed. We have a lot of internal transfers from various types of backgrounds, from like policy backgrounds, from UX research. Of course, still lots of engineers, but like sales, customer support, like it's becoming a role that is more inclusive when it comes to background. And what, for me at least, seems to be in common for all these people who come from these like diverse backgrounds is the passion to solve problems for people. So I often tell to people who want to become product managers that like it's actually a pretty crappy role if you really think about it. You have to say no, and you have to negotiate, and you have to coordinate, and you have to like it's not that glorious really if you think of the day to day. But when you have this like passion to learn, passion to understand people, passion to solve problems for them, it doesn't matter, like, because the results, the fact that you get to build these solutions kind of offsets all of that kind of day-to-day grind that is part of the role. So I think what is super important is really this kind of proactive passion, inner fire to solve problems. And if you have that, then you kind of cannot not do it. So it's often so that these people who become super successful product managers have not settled in their previous role. They have not settled on something that doesn't feel right, or like it's not solved properly, or they see an opportunity that has to be fixed. And they have not settled that I'm not in that role, or I'm not like allowed to. They just go. And they go outside of their kind of official function, and they just start figuring out, how can I solve this? And I think those kinds of people, usually you can kind of somehow sense that when you meet someone with that fire. But then beyond that, of course, you need the hard skills as well. But nowadays, I would say communication is the number one skill. You just absolutely need to have ability to distill a lot of information, communicate it clearly.
What are the 5 main skills needed in the profession of a product manager?
Okay, 5 top skills. So communication definitely is the first one. I don't know if curiosity is a skill, but it's definitely like the ability to learn, ability to proactively go after knowledge and distill what is important. It's kind of just processing information is super, super important. Empathy toward almost anything and anyone. So it's not just the user, it's your stakeholders, it's your cross-functional partners, it's the other teams. The better you can understand the various points of view and motivations of everyone around you, the more effective you will be. So top 3 was easy. I mean, writing is kind of part of communication, but I think I would still like to highlight that, because especially as non-native English speaker, it's something that I've really had to focus on, because we write a lot. And so yes, it's part of communication skills, but I would still want to kind of highlight that as something. Maybe in university you're kind of like, I have to write, not so nice, but that's the reality of the work. Like, really become good at writing and you will be so much more effective as a PM. Last one, networking and building good trust-based relationships. So that's super, super crucial. And if you can build relationships fast, you will also learn a lot faster. You will get help. And so everything will be easier.
What tools exist for rapid professional growth?
So there are so many. So I think, like, if we start by making little buckets, always as a PM, structure your answer first. So learning on the job, I think, is the most important one. Like, if you have other colleagues, it doesn't have to be even a PM, but like if you have a super good engineering manager, a design manager, whoever, who is excellent at a skill, copy, mimic what they're doing. If someone runs amazing meetings, just pick everything they do and start doing that yourself. So that's the most like low effort way of kind of continuously improving your work skills, the everyday habits you kind of use to run your day. So really observe your colleagues, because someone is always really good, much better than you are at like specific things. And that is my favorite way of learning. I also try to read a lot what others write. So I read other people's vision decks, PRDs, whatever I can get my hands on. I try to read to see how others argue for their points, how others, what kind of terminology are other people using. And that often also helps you to get your point across. Like if there are specific terms, for instance, or specific ways of saying things in your company, when you learn how to use them, your communication will be better understood as well. So I really love this kind of observing my colleagues and learning from them. I think the next bucket is more like community, network, peer-to-peer type of learning, which really happens in communities and mentoring, coaching, circles. So you might have a small group that, I don't know, reads a book together and kind of discusses that, or does everyone studies a company together and then discusses the case. So there's many ways to learn with your PM colleagues as part of some communities or smaller groups. And depending on kind of your learning goal, you probably have to figure out what is the best way. Is it a pair? Is it a group? Is it a bigger community? Is it an online chat system or whatever? And then for me, the last group is kind of formal learning, courses, seminars, conferences, etc. And I found that I've kind of not done that very much lately. So it has to be something like a really specific skill I need to learn, and a very tailored offering that I'm kind of motivated to do formal learning, because I find these two other types of learning so much more rewarding, because there is this like personal connection as well that I really, really enjoy. I always love spending time with other PMs and kind of sharing thoughts and learning from one another.
What advantages does a product manager need to have in order to get into a large international company?
I come from a tiny country, from an unknown university, and I guess the only thing going for me was a pretty well-known previous employer. So, I mean, in the beginning when I started at Google, the imposter syndrome was real. My colleagues were coming from Stanford and Harvard and MIT. So I guess when I reflect on what I had some experience on scale, like really working at scale. So Zalando, of course, is one of the biggest European companies, which helped me immensely. But the other thing is really grit. It requires a specific learning habit to prepare yourself for the interview process. It's very different from what other companies are doing. Whenever you interview for a big tech company, you really have to be well prepared, well rehearsed. And when I interview candidates, especially from Europe, I often notice that they haven't really done the preparation properly. It is unfortunate, but it really is a 6-month project to prepare for those interviews, and you should treat it as a project if you really want it. And I know people who have applied 2, 3, 4 times until they finally made it. So it requires grit.
Which must-have is worth learning to go to the first interview for your profession?
It's really about thinking. So the questions have specific structure, and the underlying goal is to really evaluate your thinking. The more you can structure and explain, the better. It is a communication challenge. So it's really, do you think like a product manager, essentially, is the question. And can you communicate your thinking effectively? Look at the preparation from that point of view. It makes it a bit more simpler. It's not like you have to memorize some frameworks or exactly know like the model answer, but like find your way to think like a product manager and communicate it in an authentic way. I mean, for me, that's the most important part. Also about the quality of ideas, and if you're really nervous or kind of stressed or afraid, the quality of your ideas is going to suffer. So some kind of mental, I'm an ex-athlete, and so I'm pretty used to doing mental exercises. So imagining how the situation will go. And so kind of imagining yourself being relaxed, being like in good connection with the interviewer, having a good conversation, and kind of instead of kind of being in this fearful state, try to prepare yourself. But it kind of like rehearse, but also like when the interview starts, you just really need to be able to mentally flip yourself into this good energy state instead of the fearful one.
What sources do you read? What books do you recommend?
It's been a while, but Cracking the PM Interview is definitely the classic. And if you really read it, if you really go through it and practice as it tells you to practice, it is good. YouTube is an endless treasure. Yeah, you just go and search for mock interviews and you'll find them. Also maybe find mock interviewers from product communities, people who may not work at Google but maybe have participated in Google interviews or other tech companies and kind of know how the process looks like. Practice with like live people. So mock interviewing is something that I see the US candidates do a lot and not so much maybe in the European habit of really kind of exposing yourself to other people when practicing. The latest books I've been reading about are actually about negotiation. That became interesting because I blew an escalation pretty badly, and I went on a hunt to understand how to escalate well. And one very senior PM told me to think of escalations as an extreme form of negotiations. And I've been reading Getting to Yes and those other kind of classic negotiations books. And I think now I agree with her that like escalation is just the extreme form of negotiation. But it's been super valuable to kind of refresh a bit on negotiation.
What advice would you have given yourself 5 years ago?
5 years ago, I didn't even believe I could ever work at Google. So maybe the advice would be that you can, if you just kind of put your mind to it. So for me, how it happened was I was contacted and then kind of understood that maybe I can, and then started the preparation for interviews. If that contact would not have happened, I probably would not work at Google. I didn't think that I would be cut for it. So for me, that was a lucky accident. And so maybe my advice for myself 5 years ago is like, if you want it, you can totally do it. Maybe craft your accidents. So I think for me, it was about being active on LinkedIn, being active in different communities. And my ex-colleagues from Zalando had moved to Google. And that way, kind of, I was noticed. And so it was kind of like unknowingly I had crafted a lucky accident for myself by being active, being well connected. But only afterwards I kind of knew what the value was. Keep doing what you're doing when it comes to being active, being helpful to other people, being always interested in other people's problems, mentoring, supporting, sharing my knowledge. Because down the line, 5 years from now, it may become extremely valuable.
And what advice would you give to people starting out in the profession?
Find mentors, participate in communities, because you are going to be overwhelmed and frustrated, and you're going to think you're the only one who feels like it's a nightmare, and you are not the only one. Everyone else is going through the same thing. So finding other people who are in the same stage or a bit ahead is like the best time investment you can make for your own mental health and progress.